Calling it a public safety concern, a New York City council member wants illegal vendors off the streets in Flushing, Queens.
They're saying that it's easy for us to get licenses. If it was easy, we would have been had a license.
Officers confiscated items from vendors on and around Roosevelt Avenue in Jackson Heights, part of an interagency response to community complaints.
New York City street vendors firing back after several high-profile raids targeting their businesses.
The city cracking down on quality of life issues tonight, focusing on illegal street vendors.
Clashes in Jackson Heights. The streets of Jackson Heights, a neighborhood in New York City, became a battleground as the NYPD clashed with migrant vendors and confiscated merchandise in a raid targeting an area known for its illicit open-air market and presence of gender workers. This raid, the second in as many days, followed reports of rampant criminal activity and disturbances in the area, prompting law enforcement to take action. The troubled block, bounded by Roosevelt Avenue, Elmhurst Avenue, and 91st Street, has garnered attention for its brazen display of stolen goods and the presence of vendors selling merchandise on blankets. On this particular day, around 1 p.m., officers descended on the area to confront approximately 10 vendors who had set up shop with what appeared to be stolen apparel items. The scene quickly escalated as police moved to confiscate the merchandise, leading to clashes with the vendors. Mateo Hipólito Dominguez found himself thrown to the ground by an officer who accused him of brandishing a box cutter. Dominguez vehemently denied the accusation, expressing disbelief at the officer's actions and questioning why he was being targeted. In an emotional outburst, Dominguez protested the treatment he received, emphasizing that he was merely trying to support his family through honest work. His frustration was palpable as he recounted the unjust treatment he and others faced at the hands of law enforcement. Despite his protestations, police proceeded to confiscate his goods and those of other vendors, loading them into a large white van for removal.
Calling it a public safety concern, a New York City council member wants illegal vendors off the streets in Flushing, Queens.
So an open-air market in Queens has been shut down by the NYPD.
City street vendors are set to rally to demand licenses and permits. It comes as the NYPD cracks down on illegal street vendors in Queens on Monday.
They're saying that it's easy for us to get licenses. If it was easy, we would have been had a license.
The situation further escalated as another vendor, Alexandra Karcha, also had her merchandise seized by police. The crackdown on the illicit activities in the area left many vendors feeling targeted and unfairly treated by law enforcement. Dominguez's remarks reflect a broader sentiment of distrust and frustration towards the police among migrant vendors in the neighborhood. Many feel marginalized and unfairly targeted, with their livelihoods threatened by the aggressive enforcement actions taken by law enforcement. The clash between the NYPD and migrant vendors highlights the complex dynamics at play in communities like Jackson Heights, where economic struggles and social marginalization intersect with law enforcement efforts to combat crime and maintain public order. While the NYPD's actions may be driven by a desire to address criminal activity and improve public safety, the heavy-handed tactics employed in raids like this one can exacerbate tensions and deepen divides within the community. Critics argue that the focus on enforcement alone fails to address the root causes of the issues plaguing neighborhoods like Jackson Heights. They point to systemic inequalities, lack of economic opportunities, and inadequate social support systems as underlying factors contributing to the proliferation of illicit activities in the area. In response to the raid and subsequent clashes, community activists and advocacy groups have called for a more holistic approach to addressing the challenges faced by migrant vendors and marginalized communities. They emphasize the need for increased outreach, support services, and dialogue between law enforcement and community members to foster trust and cooperation. Additionally, calls for accountability and transparency in police conduct have been amplified, with demands for investigations into allegations of excessive force and misconduct during the raid. Such scrutiny is essential in ensuring that law enforcement actions are carried out in accordance with legal and ethical standards, and that the rights of all individuals, including migrant vendors, are protected. Raided and ransacked. The streets of Queens, New York have become a battleground for vendors, law enforcement, and gender workers as tensions escalate over the presence of an illicit open-air market and the crackdown of the NYPD.
The city cracking down on quality of life issues tonight, focusing on illegal street vendors.
Mayor Adams says the situation there is a byproduct of the migrant crisis.
An up-close and very personal look at the conundrum that is the street vendor economy of New York City.
Officers confiscated items from vendors on and around Roosevelt Avenue and Jackson Heights, part of an interagency response to community complaints.
Recent raids targeting the area near the intersection of Elmhurst Avenue and Roosevelt Avenue have sparked controversy and drawn attention to the challenges facing both vendors and law enforcement in addressing the issue. Maria Aravello, one of the vendors affected by the raids, expressed frustration over the confiscation of her merchandise and the alleged attack of an elderly vendor by police officers. Aravello, a single mother of 3, relied on selling leggings to support her family, but found herself targeted by law enforcement despite attempting to show a certificate of authenticity for her products. Her story reflects the struggles faced by many migrant vendors who are trying to make a living in a challenging economic environment. The reluctance of vendors like Aravello to apply for permits highlights systemic barriers that hinder their ability to engage in legitimate commerce. Past attempts by Aravello's mother to obtain a permit were unsuccessful, raising doubts about the fairness and accessibility of the permitting process. Without the necessary permits, vendors are left vulnerable to police raids and confiscation of their goods, exacerbating their economic hardship. The raids conducted by the NYPD have also exposed the prevalence of stolen merchandise being sold on the streets, further complicating efforts to address the issue. Vendors selling items ranging from power tools to everyday essentials like mouthwash and diapers have been accused of peddling stolen goods obtained through theft and shoplifting. This illegal activity not only undermines legitimate businesses, but also contributes to a climate of lawlessness and insecurity in the community. Milton Reyes, the manager of Mi Farmacia in Jackson Heights, described the chaotic scene outside his store, with shoplifters openly selling stolen goods and gender workers soliciting customers on the sidewalk. The influx of migrants to the area has exacerbated the situation, creating additional challenges for law enforcement and local businesses. Reyes emphasized the need for a coordinated response to address the root causes of the problem and restore order to the neighborhood.
Well, for the second day in a row, the NYPD raided a strip of illegal vendors in Queens.
The weekend is the busiest day. They'll wrap around the entire neighborhood. It's troubling. All day long, they're lined up. The customers have problems entering the pharmacy.
Police raided the market, confiscating clothing, shoes, food, other items sold by illegal vendors.
They staged a rally at City Hall highlighting just how hard it is to get a vending license under the current regulation.
Mayor Eric Adams acknowledged the complexities of the situation, attributing the lawlessness on Roosevelt Avenue to the influx of migrants to the city and the challenges associated with integrating them into the workforce. However, his comments underscore the need for a comprehensive approach that addresses both the immediate concerns of vendors and the broader social and economic issues facing the community. In response to the raids and concerns raised by vendors and community members, advocacy groups have called for greater transparency and accountability in police conduct. Allegations of excessive force and misconduct must be thoroughly investigated to ensure that the rights of vendors are protected and that law enforcement actions are carried out in accordance with legal and ethical standards. New York's open-air market. The streets of Jackson Heights, particularly along Roosevelt Avenue near 91st Street, have transformed into a troubling scene of lawlessness and illicit activity, where illegal migrant vendors openly peddle stolen goods and gender workers solicit clients with impunity.
There was a lot of police patrolling the area here on Roosevelt Avenue.
NYPD clearing out street vendors.
Those vendors were given a midnight deadline to get out.
Say merchandise actually sold illegally has been overwhelming their streets.
And we'll send a message that quiet life needs to be fixed on Roosevelt Avenue.
This unchecked open-air market has become a source of frustration and concern for local residents and merchants who feel powerless to address the escalating problem. Milton Reyes, the manager of Mi Farmacia, described the situation as relentless, with the sidewalks overcrowded by vendors to the point where customers avoid the area altogether. Despite occasional police interventions, the vendors quickly returned to resume their operations, taking advantage of lax enforcement and soft-on-crime legislation that limits the effectiveness of law enforcement actions. The vendors, predominantly migrants, openly display stolen merchandise for sale at discounted prices, ranging from everyday items like mouthwash and diapers to more valuable goods such as electronics and clothing. The stolen goods are often stored in vans parked nearby, ready to be brought out and sold on the sidewalk at a moment's notice. Despite efforts by law enforcement to crack down on this illegal activity, the vendors continue to operate with impunity, exploiting vulnerabilities in the system and evading accountability.
New York City street vendors firing back after several high-profile raids targeting their businesses.
The issues that are impacting this area, that is not just street vendors, but the prostitution that exists here as well.
This is a no vending zone. That was the law passed in 2018 by the previous city council.
You deny!
Francisco Oporta, a security guard at Lotless, recounted the challenges faced by retailers who are constantly targeted by shoplifting migrants. Despite efforts to deter theft and apprehend perpetrators, the problem persists, resulting in significant losses for businesses and a decline in the quality of life for the community as a whole. Local residents, like Zhu H., expressed resignation and frustration at the deteriorating situation, noting the gradual escalation of the problem over time. What was once a sporadic occurrence has now become a pervasive and normalized aspect of daily life in Jackson Heights, with no clear solution in sight. The lack of effective intervention and enforcement measures has allowed the illegal migrant shopping district to flourish, undermining public safety and eroding community trust. Without decisive action to address the root causes of the problem and strengthen enforcement efforts, the situation is likely to continue unabated, perpetuating the cycle of criminality and degradation in the neighborhood. In response to the escalating crisis, there is an urgent need for coordinated action involving law enforcement, local government, and community stakeholders. This includes implementing targeted enforcement strategies, providing support services for vulnerable populations, and addressing systemic issues that contribute to the proliferation of illicit activity. By working together, stakeholders can begin to restore order and safety to the streets of Jackson Heights, ensuring that residents and businesses can thrive in a secure and vibrant community. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.